Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Digitally Uploaded Podcast, the official podcast for digitallydownloaded.net. I'm Matt Sainsbury, editor-in-chief of digitallydownloaded.net, and with me this week we've got two people. We've got Trent. Hello, Trent.
Hello.
And we've got Lee. Hello, Lee.
Hello, hello.
You're becoming a bit of a regular here.
I am indeed.
You must like us that much. Jumping straight into things, there's actually been a fair bit of news this week, which has been pretty cool. I guess things are starting to ramp up after Christmas and stuff. I guess for me, the pick of the week, the news of the week is all about PCube. PCube is a publisher based out of England, and they do a whole lot of ultra niche Japanese stuff, as I'm sure plenty of people that listen to the podcast know. They celebrated their 10-year anniversary in operation this year, which is pretty cool. That's a heck of an achievement. I guess it's impressive to survive 10 years in anything to do with games these days, let alone publishing games which may or may not have much commercial appeal. But PCube's managed to do it and do it pretty damn well. So, yeah. And on top of that, PCube has announced that they are branching away from just publishing other developers' games, and they're actually financing and developing one of their own. So we don't know anything about that except for a single screenshot at this stage. But knowing PCube, it'd be pretty good. They're working with a Japanese developer that has a long heritage, and it's going to be a visual novel, which is pretty damn cool. I'm very excited for this. Lee, what about you? What's your pick of the news of the week?
Well, you know me, I'm about that Smash life at the moment, and 2.0 was kind of a big deal, but as far as the minor changes, really not. The biggest thing, of course, was Piranha Plant's release. Met with kind of lukewarm reception. He's about middle, somewhere comfortably middle top tier, if anybody cares about that. But he's fun. He's dorky. He automatically attacks if you jump on him while you're crouching, which is a nice little touch. Throwback to the game. I mean, to his origin. And Genesis 6 is going on at the moment with like 2,000 plus entrants. Some really really interesting matches to watch. But yeah, that's about it for me.
What's Genesis 6? I have no idea about
that. It's another fighting tournament.
Right.
I don't know if it does more than Smash, does it?
I have no idea. Sure. I'm really not into competitive.
I don't know. I wasn't that into the loop until recently, so I don't know. But yeah, it's a big deal in the Smash community. So.
I see. Yeah, I have no idea how Piranha Plant works. I mean, how does he move? This is the thing that's really confusing me. He's in a pot. How does he move? This is
his animation. He sort of sprouts little legs, tiny little nubs that come out of the bottom of the plant, and he kind of just like propels. His recovery move. He sort of turns into like a plant helicopter, and you can like catch people in your propeller and fly them off stage. It's funny. He's a comical character to play.
So he's basically Game & Watch, but like a
player. No. Game & Watch is his own like blend of comedy. Piranha Plant, yeah, he's goofy. He's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve, like poison and the spike ball. And everybody was going wild about how he looks so disappointed if you try and do the spike ball again. And he doesn't have it. He just gets like this frown on his face and looks so dejected. And of course, the best part about him is his victory screen. One of his victory screens where Mario attempts to jump on him and he snaps at him. And that was clever.
Cool. No, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I mean, that was obviously something that people were looking forward to in the lead up to Smash, because Nintendo was, that was the big reason to pre-order the thing, right? You get that guy. As the
sort of that in the
premium.
Yes,
that's true. That's the one. But anyway, that was something that people who were buying the game early were looking forward to. It's good that Nintendo delivered. Now we can move on to the DLC characters. Please give me Chocobo. Just
agreed.
Just if you're listening, Nintendo, I've been waiting. Piranha Plant's cool and all, but Chocobo's a better fit. Just do it.
I'm more waiting for the currently announced one. Like, where is my Joker? Why isn't it out yet?
I don't know. He'll probably come about the same time that Persona 5 comes to the Switch, which is actually never. That was all just a trick, just to disappoint you, Trent.
Side note: I hear word that the Prince of All Cosmos might be a Smash character from Katamari.
That would be cool. See,
it'd be crazy.
That'd be great. Trent, what about you? What's your pick of the news of the week?
My news is going to be boring. I'm going to go over financial results which Nintendo released. And on the topic of Smash Bros, apparently it's sold really, really well and is really has a really high sell-through compared to pretty much any other game ever. In like the first few weeks, it's selling really, really much in terms of adaptation. So that's pretty cool. But other than that, apparently the Switch is not meeting financial expectations. They had to scale back their expected, revenue this year. But that still doesn't mean it's not interesting because the Switch is actually so close to beating Nintendo 64 in terms of worldwide sales. If it just pushes it a little bit more. So the 64 is on 32.93 sold, and then the Switch is on the 32.27 million sold from the latest financial records. So it's so close to beating out the 64, and everyone would play the 64, right? So it's up there, I guess.
You're talking units, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Switch is on track. I think it's tracking just behind the Wii for the same time frame. I think it's ahead of what was the next one? The PlayStation 2, I want to say, was the next fastest selling console for this year.
Yeah, the PlayStation 2 was it before the Wii.
Yeah, it's certainly right up there. I think the expectations by a lot of people is over its lifetime it won't quite meet the Wii. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a roaring success, because obviously it has been, and Nintendo's certainly doing a good job with it. It'll be interesting to see how they can, if they can continue that momentum, because obviously Smash Brothers was a big booster for the console.
I think they will.
In the lead
They're
up
being
to
smart
Christmas,
about their releases.
But what they've got next, who knows? I mean, they've kind of tapped out their major franchises. They've done Zelda, Mario, and now Smash Brothers, and also Mario Kart. So,
and Metroid's shelved for now.
Yeah, Metroid's shelved. It's on the back burner. So this year's
What
going
else
to
do
be
they
an
have?
interesting one. I mean, they've got a lot of stuff coming. Fire Emblem will be the big release for the Switch this year, but Fire Emblem's more a game for people who are existing fans of Nintendo and Fire
Yeah, that
Emblem.
doesn't get me terribly excited.
It's not something that shifts consoles as such. It's great. It's going to be great. It'll be probably my game of the year. Every bloody Fire Emblem game's my game of the year. But that one won't shift consoles. Likewise, if Animal Crossing happens this year, which it might, would it sell consoles? I'm not sure. I don't know if many people would buy a Switch because of Animal Crossing.
I feel like the base is already owners of the Switch.
Yeah, it's another one of those properties that's kind of a for Nintendo fans property first, and not a huge audience outside of that. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Who knows? Maybe Nintendo will do the right thing and port the Fatal Frame game or the Project Zero game.
Well, they've got Pokemon this year, so they're fine.
Yeah, Pokemon will sell probably some copies, and they've got a couple of Wii U games they can still tap into. Maybe we'll get Mario Maker this year because they just need to.
I hope so.
Something out there that'd be good. That was great on the Wii U. It was terrible on the 3DS.
Well, the expectation is also that the Switch will get a slimline version. Is the current rumor, like a smaller version is the current rumor, I guess, for that.
Didn't Reggie?
Yeah,
I thought Reggie already said that's not happening.
There still seems to be strong, rumors about, there's a hardware, update coming at some point, and it's probably going to happen. And Reggie says things don't happen all the time, and it turns out they happen, or he's going to do something like Mother 3 and it never happens. Don't believe Reggie.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And on that note, we'll go to some music. We've got some Hatsune Miku music lined up. I'm not sure what song yet. It'll happen. It'll be one of the good ones. And we'll come back and we'll talk about what we'll talk about. We'll talk about roguelikes first up this week. And welcome back, everybody. So, the roguelike. Both Trent and I have been playing a new roguelike that was released last week. We've been playing it pretty heavily. It's called Genesis Alpha 1. It's on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, I think. I'm pretty sure PC as well. And I think Trent and I both agree on this one. It's a pretty damn good game, actually. It's basically like FTL, the classic, I guess, indie roguelike about traveling through space. Yeah, traveling through space, building up a ship as you travel along, getting new crew members, visiting planets, taking risks by exploring places with, and all the dangers, facing down all the dangers of outer space. So it's got all of that stuff. It's got the shipbuilding mechanics in there. The difference is that this one actually plays out from first-person perspective as well. So when you're on your ship, it's basically a first-person shooter, and aliens invade, and you shoot them down. You go on away missions to planets and kill more aliens while collecting resources and all that kind of stuff. And it's a really good blend of shooter and roguelike, and it's as difficult as you'd expect a roguelike to be, and about as rewarding, really, as one of the better ones. So I was really impressed with it, actually. I didn't go in with particularly any great expectations, but came away very impressed indeed. I think you're pretty much the same, aren't you, Trent?
Yeah, like I definitely looked at it and, definitely didn't think it was a game I'd be interested in when I first saw, the material, and was just like, oh, well, it looks a bit cool, but, I probably really don't want to play it, like, sort of thing. But then you're like, no, you're playing it. And I actually was quite surprised about the whole game. And yeah, I really fell in love with, how it works, like, just, in terms of gameplay, like, it's definitely fresh. Like, roguelikes are definitely, like, everywhere now, but, like, it's definitely an interesting twist on, what Faster Than Life did. Faster Than Light, sorry, not Life. And what a few other games in this genre have done with, like, you build a ship and you do whatever. Like, it's definitely taken that spin and sort of made it its own. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I'm glad you point that out, because when I just looked at the game, not like a gameplay trailer, but I was looking at screenshots and I was like, oh, it's a shooter. And then you guys are like, oh, it's kind of a shooter, but it's got these roguelike elements. And I didn't think I was going to be interested at first, because, like, that was my first impression. I was like, I probably wouldn't get into this, but I actually might check it out. I'm a little sold on it.
Yeah, I was much the same. I mean, as anybody who knows me knows, I'm not a huge fan of shooters at the best of times. But this one, and like you said, when I first saw it in action, or saw the screenshots anyway, I thought it was going to be heavily shooter influenced one, but actually the simulation side of stuff, the shipbuilding stuff, the resource collecting, the exploration of space stuff, all of that is definitely the core of the game. And the shooting is just, I guess, atmospheric more than anything else, because it's much more, I guess, intense and immediate, that you're facing down the aliens through first-person perspective, as opposed to FTL or one of those other more abstract games where you're kind of looking at the ship from above, from an isometric standpoint. So yeah, very, very impressed with that one. But yeah, playing that, I'm also playing through another roguelike at the moment on the Switch. It's called City of Brass. This is an Australian developed one. It's a first-person action roguelike that's set in the Arabian Nights kind of fantasy. So you're exploring the City of Brass, which is a location from Arabian Nights. There's sand everywhere. There's kind of genies and magic and all that kind of stuff, which really appeals to me because I'm a big fan of Arabian Nights. I really love the game on the PS4, enjoying playing it on the Switch, which hopefully isn't breaking embargo to say. But yeah, that's another review to look forward to. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about roguelikes this week, because just about everything seems to be a roguelike these days. Developers seem to have latched onto that term, especially in the indie space, in a very dramatic way. It's almost like where the AAA development is all about open worlds and games as a service and other crap like that. The indie space is all about roguelikes and finding some way to call your game a roguelike. So I wanted to talk about that, because I don't think a lot of games that are called roguelikes are really roguelike at all.
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick.
That's right.
We're sort of phrasing this in a way that makes it sound like it was their intent deliberately to sound like, hey, this is a roguelike game. And sure, if they put that in their description, obviously they're doing that, but it could be an after the fact thing. And
No, in a lot of cases, like these things I'm talking about, actual press releases land in my inbox saying this is, rogue-like elements, rogue-light elements, rogue,
yeah,
elements, and it's just basically if it seems to be indies. A lot of indies seem to think that as long as their game has randomly generated levels, it must therefore be a roguelike, which I would contest.
I actually think the opposite has happened with Genesis. I feel like a lot of the marketing seems more focused on the fact that you can shoot things. I feel like the roguelike elements sort of, it's mentioned, but I don't feel like it's as heavily suggested as what, so I feel like there's games which are doing the opposite as well, like picking something in the game which would obviously sell to a more broader market, like say you can shoot things and there's a little bit more strategy, there's a little bit more complex nature there.
You know why I think that is? I think that we're currently, like, with the number of games that have these roguelike elements to them, I think we're coming to a point where it's sort of an industry standard as far as replayability goes, because we all know what the roguelike element is, and what the definition is like procedural generation, chance of death, that threat, that constant threat that you could lose progress if you die, that keeps you on the edge of your seat, and the randomness keeps it fresh. And those are two elements of gameplay that just, if they're gone, it gets stale a lot faster.
Yeah, and that's definitely a thing. I think that a lot of indies use roguelike or roguelike light or whatever you want to call them elements in order to create that replay value perception in the players that's functionally these games are unlimited. You can just keep replaying them, and every time it's a different experience and all that kind of stuff, which has a certain appeal to it. I know. I discovered roguelikes through Rogue and Mystery Dungeon way back in the day when they weren't so common. And the reason that I was so attracted to them was because of that very idea that they are functionally unlimited games. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of indies also use them these days because they're relatively easy to implement. I think there's probably a lot of examples out there that indies can draw on to make their own roguelikes, and it saves them the effort of actually having to come up with a level or level design. It saves them a lot of effort in creativity that would otherwise be necessary. And this isn't to rag on Genesis Alpha 1 or City of Brass or any of the other roguelikes I really like, but I do get a sense with a lot of them as well that the random element is there simply because these developers couldn't be bothered coming up with decent level design.
Yeah, you're right, and I think at least the most recent example that I've encountered was Moonlighter. If you guys played that, it's sort of like a duel game where you run the shop and then you go into the dungeon, and the dungeon is procedurally generated. But I felt like even though it was procedurally generated, it still felt kind of the same because the levels between themselves, the enemies, etc., like the layouts, it just wasn't all that different.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I think if a roguelike is not particularly well designed, they don't have much variation in terms of the way the levels look and feel. And because of that, ironically enough, I think given what the developers probably wanted to achieve, there's less incentive to replay those games because there's just nothing interesting to look at as you're playing. They just become very, I hate using this word because it's kind of the wrong word, but for lack of a better word, they become very repetitive, and that becomes tiring and draining. And a bad roguelike, of which there are far too many, unfortunately, are exhausting experiences, I find, especially when they're also hard, I think.
Yeah, not rewarding for the time you're putting in.
Exactly. I mean, a good roguelike should be very difficult. I do think that the genre suits difficulty because it is about that making incremental improvement by replaying the game over and over again. So I've got no problem with that. But if there's no sense of reward for what you're doing, and you don't get a sense that you're still getting better at the game, you're still progressing in some way, it becomes very grindy. But it's interesting to see the genre applied in interesting ways as well. I don't know if you guys played a game from last year, which I absolutely loved. It was probably kind of one of my highlights of the year. It's called Bad North.
No.
Okay, so Bad North is a kind of mini tactical real-time strategy game where each level's kind of on an island and you've got a couple of units and you need to defend that island from invading hordes of Vikings. And those levels are all procedurally generated, and the structure of the game is you can pick which island to go next, and that all is procedurally generated as well. It is functionally a kind of strategy roguelike game, and that was certainly a really good example of how developers can use the roguelike structure in an interesting way. I highly recommend everybody.
It also helps the game is pretty good looking.
It's a gorgeous example of minimalism done well. It's a really good example of how indies can do something that is really compelling. It's just unfortunate for that game. It came out at the same time as Into the Breach, which is another roguelike, which just rolled over everyone. I think that was the highlight of a lot of people's years, that game.
Yeah, I hear people that have played it say it was great, and I just look at it and I'm like, I'm not feeling it.
I didn't get quite as hooked to it as I did to Bad North. I must admit, I played Bad North. I think this on my Switch says it's like over 100 hours of Bad North, actually. I really love that one. I haven't played Into the Breach anywhere near as much, but I can certainly see where it's coming from. It's like Advance Wars meets a puzzle game, meets a roguelike, because, again, procedural generation from one level to the next, and it works a little bit like Advance Wars, but it's more about positioning the units and that kind of puzzle kind of experience. So
I'm glad to hear about that, because that's innovation. As far as like the standard roguelike, though, I feel like the bar has kind of been set a little, well, years ago. I mean, you probably can guess I'm about to bring up Binding of Isaac, the hundreds of hours that I've put into it, but it's because every time I play it, there's something new. And it surprises me every time that this game can still throw something new at me that I've never seen before. There's still so much to unlock. And it's still fun. Like, the gameplay itself holds well on its own. That's got to be the core of the roguelike experience. Not the actual rogue-like elements, but the gameplay itself has to be good as well.
Yeah, for some reason I've never quite been able to get into Binding of Isaac and its billions of games that it's inspired, like Enter the Gungeon and all that kind of stuff. I don't know why. I can see that it's a well-made game, and I can certainly appreciate that a lot of people have really enjoyed it over the years, including quite a few people on the DDNet team, not just yourself. Alan, when he's listening through to this and editing the podcast, is going to be absolutely furious that we talked about Isaac with him not around.
I didn't like it, Isaac.
I quite enjoyed Isaac. I just, for me, the roguelike is more from Rogue itself. And Mystery Dungeon for me is the kind of the standard, and I enjoy games that kind of break away from that if they're done well, of course. But yeah, for me, I think that kind of turn-based dungeon crawler is where I come from with the
Sword of the Stars, The Pit. I feel like we talked about that last week too. I think I might have brought that up.
We probably did. Dwarf Fortress. I know I definitely mentioned that last week, and those kinds of games are for me where roguelikes come from. But what about you, Trent? For you, what kind of traits does a good roguelike have?
Well, I definitely like ones where, as you were saying earlier, with difficulty, roguelikes, lend themselves to hard games. But I'm a kind of person which, time doesn't really, believe in me anymore. And if a game takes 5 hours to feel like I've got progress, or only to have it stripped away, or long games in general from other genres, if they take 60 hours to complete, I just don't have the time to do a lot of those games. So a good roguelike would have to have the balance where a difficulty, yes, it needs to be a little bit challenging, it needs to be a little bit hard to obviously want to go back, but it also needs to be rewarding and at the point where, I do feel like I've made progress. I feel like in Genesis, I know that's a recent example, but, it actually did that quite well. Every time I died, or canceled the game myself and started from scratch, I didn't feel like I was, being beaten down by the game. I actually felt like, yes, I was making progress with the game. I was understanding the game a little bit more. I was making, strides in terms of, okay, well, this time I'll do this and it will give me this outcome. Like, I was making that progress. So a good roguelike will need to obviously do that, because, if I sit down for like 2 hours and suddenly, like, I had games in general which do this, like, ones which maybe have no save points or anything. And it's like, well, 2 hours later, you've missed like, and you die, and then you've got like half an hour to an hour gone because that was the last save point. Like, I just, need to have that progress. And yeah, a good roguelike will need to obviously do that.
I think a good roguelike that respects the player's time is FTL, is a really good example of that. You can play through FTL in about 3 or 4 hours, I want to say. You can get right through to the end of the game and probably lose to the boss, because that end boss is just impossible to defeat.
But, that first time, you're not prepared.
Yeah, you just got no chance. But it's quite quick, and then the replay value of the game is in just how much random stuff happens as you play each time through. So, yeah, I think FTL is a really good example of that. On that note, we've run over time. We'll go to some music. We'll listen to something from a good roguelike. We'll pick a music we'll use something from City of Brass. If I can find something from City of Brass, we'll use that, because that's got a good soundtrack. Okay, we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Okie dokie. So we're going to talk about the eShop this week, because it annoys me. It annoys me so much. We're talking about the Nintendo eShop, of course. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but if you log onto your Nintendo eShop each week and log in at the start of the week when the releases of the week haven't come out, and then log in at the end of the week when the releases of the week have come out, you can't see anything anymore, because there's just an unending flood of new games released on the Switch each week. And I want to start this discussion by simply saying I think Nintendo really needs to work on the discoverability in that platform, because when you're seeing new games drop off the new releases list within a week, it's good for Nintendo because there's a lot of games obviously being released on it, but it's long-term quite bad for the developers because it means that a lot of really good games are going missing. And I know I speak to a lot of people who don't check the eShop every week, and they have no idea what's coming out on that console.
I feel like it's a pretty simple fix, to be honest. All they got to do is put a genre tab up at the top of recent releases. That would
help. Yeah,
that
that
would
would
be
be
curated lists, like like
they have a curated list though, in featured. But I think
they do have it. Yeah, they have that new tab. Well, the tab that they introduced, I think it was at the start of the year. The what's it called? Discover or something, isn't it? And it's like
it's different between regions, but I think yours is Discover or something, and mine's featured.
Yeah, that one. Which is where Nintendo kind of picks, I guess, one or two good games from particular genres that they want to highlight or have whatever going on. That's fine. But yeah, that new releases section, and to be fair, a lot of this stuff that is new releases does deserve to drop off the front page pretty much immediately because there's an awful lot of really bad stuff coming out on the Switch, unfortunately. But there's a lot of really good stuff that is, I do think, is going missed. And it's kind of getting to the point where even the sales, which is usually a good chance to get a new hit of discoverability for a game, even the sales tab is just overloaded with a whole lot of stuff that's getting sales each week. And
it's just overloaded with desperation.
Yeah, it's just a mess to wade through, and it kind of annoys me because when the Switch first came out, all of that stuff worked, but there was only 3 or 4 or 5 games being released each week. Now you've got upwards of 25 or so, and it's just frustrating to navigate and slow, very slow.
What if they put a separate tab for ports? I don't know how well that would work. I mean, it would solve a lot of issues, but
yeah, that would work. I mean, the other thing that Nintendo could do is fix the news section of the console, because there's a good opportunity there to have news feeds and whatever, and I guess take the data of what people are buying and then feed them up news about games that would be of interest to them. But at the moment, it just seems to be a jumble of random stuff that's thrown up there, and I don't know anybody that really checks the news section, which is
especially if you have multiple Regis accounts, it sort of becomes like 5 different articles about the same thing, one in Japanese, one from Europe, and one from America, and it's just like, oh, great.
Well, no, what bothers me is they don't tell you what region it's for until the very end. So like over the holidays, like towards the end of the year, I was just looking at these deals that were going on in, which one was it? It was Europe, and that was when I was looking for like ways. How can I get some cards?
Yeah,
because I saw, what was it? Another roguelike, the musical one.
Crypt of the Necrodancer.
Crypt of the Necrodancer was like $1, and and then I look at the bottom and it says this is for accounts in Europe. I'm like, okay, so I click on it.
Yeah,
and it boots me back out. I was like, no, I wanted this.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious when it's the Japanese store feeding up the news, because the news is in Japanese. That makes it nice and easy. But you're right. Definitely, I see news that might be of interest to me from time to time, but it comes from the American account, and yeah, it's just.
While we're on the topic of buggy software, which is, I guess that's not really a bug, but I would like to point out how odd I think it is that tabbing between like recent releases, featured, or whatever it's called for the other regions, is really slow, like weirdly slow. And I say weirdly because the Switch overlay, whatever it's called, the behind the scenes software, the operating system, that's what I mean, is so fast, and snapshots go really easy. It doesn't matter where you're at in a game, you can always pop out of it with the home screen. I don't know why it's so slow.
Well, I think if you use Nintendo's website itself, as in the World Wide Web, www.nintendo.com or whatever it is, that website loads ridiculously slow as well. So I think it's just Nintendo servers are not up to the task of how much traffic they get, or Nintendo doesn't know how to maintain its servers, or I don't know what it is. But
the question, has the eShop gone slower since Smash Brothers release?
I don't think so. I haven't noticed that, but I do find it to be a very slow, painful process to navigate, and it's not a good thing to be unfavorably comparable to the PlayStation 4's online store, because the PlayStation 4's online store is not great in itself, and discoverability on that console has its own issues. But yeah, it's just not a pleasant experience to be shopping on the Switch e-store, and that's a pity, because a lot of the great games that are coming out on Switch are digital only. Like, for example, well, just looking at the recent releases right now, Thea the Awakening's at the very top of mine, and that's a great game, a really great game, but it's digital only. And I think a lot of people are already giving up on the Switch's digital side of things, because it's just not an easy way of shopping for games.
There still seems to be statistics which suggest that indie developers, you know, when it comes to the Nintendo Switch, they're getting the most sales, the most people are looking at. So it's still working somehow, but something's going wrong for general viewable.
There are obviously a lot of people that are buying games on the eShop and all that kind of stuff, but it is a percentage of the audience rather than the majority of the audience. I would suggest that if you look at the PlayStation audience, the numbers of people actually using the PlayStation Network store in one way or another, whether it's just for PS Plus or it's for whatever, is higher. And Sony's done a good job in encouraging people to jump on and make sure that they're using that store. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting, for example, is the way that those subscription services work. Nintendo's one, once you've signed up for the thing, you never need to go back into the shop again. The games are actually in a dedicated app separate to the shop, and you don't need to download them. They're just there when you load the app up. Whereas with PlayStation Plus, the free games, free in inverted commas because they're just part of the subscription, they're not free at all. But to get those, you actually have to go into the PlayStation Store to download them, which is, for me, that's a better way of encouraging people to use the store in the first place, because they're there. Once they're there, you've got a chance to show them other stuff and get them to try some of those games that aren't released at retail. So
the question is, does the PlayStation have more, how much storage space does it come with, like, naturally?
The PlayStation Pro that I've got has 1 terabyte, but
I have 500 in mine. I'm an original PlayStation.
The console's now expandable because you can attach external storage to it. So I've got an 8 terabyte hard drive sitting there, full of games.
Right,
and 8 terabytes of games is a lot of games.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm looking for the Switch. How much does this
Switch? The Switch has 32 gigabytes built into it. And you can expand that using micro SD cards, which I do.
This way, with the PlayStation 4, I was the one saying, oh, no, you don't need to have like external hard disk. You're fine. And in the course of doing stuff at digitallydownload.net, now I've got like an external hard disk for my PlayStation, because I'm like, oh, now I'm like deleting or moving or getting rid of games which I've got saved. I'm just like, oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, the games journalist's life as such means that we end up with more games that we can possibly play, really, and they all just kind of sit on hard drives. But yeah, the point is, yes, you're right. There is less built-in memory to the Switch, which in itself is a barrier, I guess, to getting people to buy it. But Nintendo's done a good job making that as expandable as possible, because it's really easy to switch between micro SD cards. It's really no more complex than switching between game cards, and they are just micro SD cards. You can buy those anywhere. It's not like the PlayStation Vita had its proprietary memory storage, or the 3DS. You had to actually physically unscrew the whole console to switch memory cards around, which was just nuts. So yeah, I think Nintendo's done what it needed to from a hardware point of view to make the shop something that people would want to use. It's just the experience of the shop itself, which is just terrible.
I have the sneaking suspicion they didn't expect it to be this. Maybe they expected the popularity, but they might not have expected it to be so inundated with such high space taking up games. I know I worded that kind of weird, but I was just looking, like, Thea itself is almost a gig, so that's not too bad. But what was the one? It was the detective game by Rockstar.
Oh, L.A. Noire.
Yeah, LA Noire, where it actually says, like, in the shop's description, it's like, you're gonna have to buy a card for this because it's like 90 gigs or something crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is funny. Yeah, but I don't think I've actually had a Switch game more than 20 gigabytes, I want to say. Oh, actually, no. I think Hyrule Warriors Complete Edition Bonanza, whatever it's called. I think that was about 23 gigabyte or thereabouts. I think that's about the biggest one I've got. But yeah, I think Nintendo should probably bundle some SD cards into some of these consoles to
for sure
highlight to people that, hey, you can actually expand on the internal memory in the console. I think Nintendo's tried to do something a little bit, because you can actually, I don't know about in America, but in Australia, if you go into the EB Games, you can buy SD cards that actually have Nintendo licensing on them. So the package itself has like a Breath of the Wild art across it. So Nintendo obviously did a partnership with, I think it's SanDisk, to have licensed memory cards.
But
not that
just
they
look at
do
the
anything.
prices for it. It's like the SanDisk normal, like 128 gig. If you get that on special, you can get down to like $32 Australian. Like they go pretty cheap, even with the same class, etc. If you look at the Nintendo ones, what are they, like 50, like if not more, like 100?
Yeah,
like,
but supposedly
expensive.
you're supposed
No,
to.
they are the high grade ones, Trent. Without trying to get too technical, memory cards actually have different grades of speed, read write, and for consoles, you generally want the faster ones, because that's a lot of data that gets moved into and out of the game as you play it. The ones that Nintendo you buy with the Nintendo licensing on it are the highest grade, the fastest memory cards.
Yeah, but what I mean is like the fastest ones, non-Nintendo brands, still get like more sales, still get more, like they go come pretty cheap at times. Like, whereas the Nintendo ones are still, oh, Nintendo branded, I need this for my console. And then it's like a 20% markup or something.
Yeah, in fairness, I did get a 128 gig. It was not an official, but I think it was a SanDisk. And are you sure that they partnered with SanDisk? That sounds right. But I haven't had any issues. Supposedly I don't know, there was supposed to be like some kind of memory corruption or something. I don't know. I haven't experienced anything like that.
I mean,
most of my games are downloaded.
I mean, it's not that they're poor quality ones. The non-officially licensed ones, it's just a bit of branding, really. It's just the Breath of the Wild art on the front, and it's exactly the same memory card that you'd buy off the shelf in any other store.
Well, I'll happily get Breath of the Wild art on like a case, but something on a memory card.
Yeah. So yeah, I lost my train of thought there. Completely lost my train of thought. But I think the point was that Nintendo's done a little bit to try and encourage people, I guess, to buy these memory cards so they can expand the memory of their Switches. But I think probably bundling is a good idea, and making the eShop a better experience so that people actually want to use it would be good, because, yeah, like I said earlier, there's an awful lot of really great stuff on the Switch eShop that a lot of people otherwise wouldn't play because it's not on boxes on the retail shelf.
People should just do what us journalists do, which is like follow people on Twitter, follow mostly indie developers, follow mostly artists, and then you see other artists tweeting other people's work, and then you slowly get a progress where you slowly see other works on Twitter, and then suddenly realize, oh, well, this person's doing this interesting game. That sounds cool. Like, that's how I saw stuff for the Stillness of the Wind like a few weeks back. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But it's because I was following a developer which was liking an artist which was doing all this, and then it was on my feed. Like, I feel like the only way to discover new games is through Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter's actually pretty good for that. On that note, we're going to go to some music from. Well, let's use some music from Thea, because we talked about that in the section, and Thea's got some pretty good music as well.
Yeah.
We'll be back after that to talk about, funnily enough, a Switch game that isn't available at retail. So you'll have to grab it off the eShop, but it'll be worth it, and you'll find out why after this music. Welcome back, everybody. So, for the final section of the podcast, we are going to talk about a new game that has been turning heads, or people have been looking forward to for quite a while, and it is finally out, and it is delivering on everything that everybody ever wanted from it. That game is WarGroove. WarGroove. It's by Chucklefish, which is a particularly talented little indie developer, and WarGroove is basically Advance Wars, but set in a kind of Fire Emblem-like fantasy world of magic and knights and stuff. And yeah, it's people are really looking forward to it, or people have been really enjoying it, I guess, because Nintendo's basically dumped Advance Wars and hasn't done a new one for a long time, and now people are getting that action back in a game that is of equal quality. Because there's been a couple of Advance Wars likes that have been released over the years. Tiny Metal was released, I think, 2 years ago on the Switch. I just reviewed one earlier this week, Mecha Wars, which was also released on the Switch recently. And those games are decent enough fun, but I think WarGroove takes it to another level and really understands what people loved about Advance Wars and really ran with it. And it's great. It's really, really great. And the other thing is, in addition to the campaign mode, you can actually, it's got one of the most comprehensive creator modes that I've come across, in that you can not just create new levels to share online and play, but you can actually create entire campaigns, which is pretty cool.
No, dude, yeah, I am about that.
Pretty cool. So you can link together a series of missions. I don't know how complex it is, to be honest. I haven't actually got into it yet, but I assume that you can tell some kind of little story in there as well. And that's
like
really
a mini
cool.
RPG maker. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's face it. I mean, the ability to play kind of an endlessly expandable Advance Wars like game where people are creating entire campaigns it's pretty mind blowing. So
I don't think Chucklefish can do anything wrong either. To be honest, they got Starbound and Stardew Valley under their belt.
Yeah, and this game has much the same appeal. It's got that lovely, gorgeous use of warm pixels. Is the very technical term for it. Very, very pretty use of pixel graphics and a great animation. There's great personality through it. You can actually control little war dogs, and they're so cute. And yeah, the production quality of the game is just right up there as well. So definitely check it out if you haven't yet. I imagine most of the people listening to this podcast have already checked it out anyway. But yeah, have a look at it. It's really, really great.
Well, it just came out today, right?
I think it did just come out today. Yeah.
Okay.
Just within the last day or so. So it's a very new game, and by the time people listen to this podcast, it's only 4 or 5 days old. But yeah, grab it, and there's already a couple of campaigns that you can download on there in addition to the story mode. So you've already got dozens of hours of contents to enjoy. So yeah, more broadly speaking, when it comes to tactics strategy games, so as opposed to Civilization and those kind of broad strategy games, this is more the tactical side of things. Are you a fan of them, Lee?
Fantastic. I loved Final Fantasy Tactics. That was what got me into the genre. That was like my first taste of a sort of Game of Thronesy like story, and I could talk at length about it. I mean, it was great. It's got all the elements. It's got the betrayal, the childhood friend, people turning into demons. Of course, that's a Final Fantasy thing. Of course, that's going to happen. But it's and as far as like the character customization and the strategy elements and the grinding, which at the time was okay. I was okay with doing that. Maybe not so much nowadays. I don't know how much there is in WarGroove that you would have to do to say if like you come across an encounter where you like. In Final Fantasy Tactics example, you really need a summoner for this one, because if you don't AoE all these chocobos down or whatever, they're going to cast Meteor and it's just going to blow up everything.
I mean, WarGroove doesn't actually have any experience levels. It's not an RPG on any level. It's purely the tactics side of things. So that's why I was kind of comparing it more to Advance Wars than I guess Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics, because yeah, I guess the strategy in the game is about building more units and then using those units in a way that lets you kind of capture the opponent's bases and all of that kind of stuff. So it's slightly different, I guess, to Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, which is very similar, and I certainly love those as well.
Yeah, it's more like war army based than single unit based, which is still cool. Personally, I do prefer like the having that hero unit, that one or two just bad fellas that just steamroll, like Orlando from Final Fantasy Tactics. That was the man, the Thunder God. But I don't know. That's
absolutely. I mean, the advantage, I guess, those RPG tactics crossover games have is that you get a sense of character through them because, it's the same character each time and they've got a name and personality and they're part of the narrative and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with a game like WarGroove, it's more units are dispendable because they don't have names. There is a hero unit on the field each time, and those hero units are kind of what the story revolves around. And if either of those units gets defeated in the battle, that's the end of the level for that person, that side. So that's kind of it's like a king in chess, really, that kind of piece, the really important piece. But otherwise, yes, you're right, the characters don't have personality, they don't level up, and there is a certain I prefer Fire Emblem, I guess, to Advance Wars for that same reason. I liked the sense of character and the progression of those characters through one level to the next. But
it's like a personal connection.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not to say I don't love Advance Wars, especially when it's like WarGroove and it's that kind of super bright, super charming game as well.
I'm definitely gonna have to check this out, though. That sounds good.
Yeah, it really is. It impressed me more than I thought. I was already looking forward to it. Knew I was going to buy it on day one. But yeah, it's impressed me more. As soon as we get off the podcast recording, this is my weekend sorted now. Trent, what about you? Are you a fan of these tactics games? And
yeah, definitely. Like I'm down for like Final Fantasy Tactics. Like,
yes.
That's where I'm like into that sort of stuff. Like, but I sort of like games like that for more stories. Like, really hate tactics games which are just aimlessly doing tactics. Like, I like a little bit more story. Like, for me, openings of games are really important. Like Final Fantasy Tactics, that whole snowball fight set the tone for like the characters, set the tone for like the game. Everything after that was great because of that snowball fight. Like, if I was
you mean Final Fantasy Tactics Advance?
Yes, I do. Yes, if I was
I was going to say.
There's no snowball fight. There's no snowball fight at the start of Final Fantasy Tactics, Trend. It's a little bit of a darker start to that game.
Well, no, the equivalent in Tactics was the grass flute thing. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if I got just dumped into Deliverance or whatever the town or whatever the universe was called, I sort of would have been a little bit more, okay, well, I'm in this new world, that's cool, but it would have been hard to sort of explore and pick up the characters. And I guess with the snowball fight, it really helped in terms of seeing the tone of that game. So that's why Advance is way better than the original as well. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, I really like these sort of games. I've played Advance Wars a bit. I like the dark, like, evil Advance Wars, like the one where it was like post-apocalyptic, that sort of thing. That was cool. And I played some of the recent Final Fantasy. The other thing,
Fire Emblem.
Fire Emblem, that's the one. Yes, I played the more recent Fire Emblems. I haven't played anything probably older than the Game Boy Advance games, but I've played the DS games. Really like the DS games. I think I picked up one of the 3DS games, but not all of them. But, the new Switch game, I'm excited for that. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always wondered why, beyond the obvious assumption that they sell better, why the Fire Emblem games have become such a priority for intelligent systems, and why Advanced Wars has kind of been left to the wayside. I can only assume that people do like their characters to have character. And Fire Emblem kind of resonates with people because of that storytelling side of things rather than just the core tactics action. But then I look at something like, I don't know, I look at something like XCOM or something, and those games are certainly very popular as well. And there's less of a sense of character to those. Although I guess, in saying that, you do certainly get attached to your characters in XCOM from one mission to the next, even though they don't really have a story role, because they just become such valuable resources. And when they die, it's
That's
just
the
so
biggest
frustrating. Yeah.
Very, very frustrating.
It's just so, it drives me nuts when I play XCOM and I spend 5 or 6 hours leveling some character up across like a dozen missions, and then
because he's next.
Yeah, exactly.
He's gonna get caught by some garbage out of nowhere.
After missing an attack, which was like a 90% chance of hitting, and just leaves him out in the open, and then the alien goes and wallops him back, and he's dead, and it's just so frustrating. But anyway, that's a bit of a digression. I do like XCOM games as well. I really like them, and the Switch has its first one actually as of this week or last week as well. So it's been a good couple of weeks for tactics games on the Switch. The XCOM-like that's out on the Switch now is called Achtung, Cthulhu Tactics. It's a Lovecraft meets Nazi World War II shoot the Nazi simulator game, which is great. Well worth looking at. yeah, it's Cthulhu. It's Lovecraft's monsters teams up with Nazis, and you get to shoot a lot of them, which is a pretty good idea for a game. Let's face it, and it works pretty well. It's a good bit of fun as well. So yeah, good couple of weeks for tactics on the Switch, and that's great because I actually think that tactics games work better portable as well. Sitting down in front of a screen for a couple of hours is great and all when you get really hooked on them, but it's also good to be able to pick them up and play, 1 or 2 missions while you're on a train or something and need to kill some time. So I think the Switch is a good fit for this particular genre, and WarGroove is proving that too.
I agree. On that, I'm glad Thea came out too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, also Thea. Thea's a little bit, I think, beyond. It's a different kind of thing to tactics game, but I certainly agree with you that it's another really great looking game that you should absolutely check out, and it does have tactical elements as well. And yeah, it's really good for the Switch too. On that note, we'll go to some music and wrap things up. I think I don't know what music we'll go to. Let's pick something a little bit different in tone. Let's go with. Why not? Let's go with something from Fire Emblem, because Fire Emblem has good music. I'm not sure which Fire Emblem, but it's from one of them. And we'll, if you want to know which one, grab us on social media and we'll tell you once we figured it out. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. And thanks for being on the podcast, Lee and Trent. It's good to have you on as always. And we will be back next week. Thanks very much.